Okay, we've got Nightmare coming up. It jumped the road, it's heading towards English Hill. Jumped over the line on spot fire. Pleasant Valley Road, now passable in a couple of spots. Okay, just double that order to 10 Type 1 engine strike teams. That sounds good, but it ain't even going to be a damn 10. What's happening here?
As a hand crew, all you can do is sit and watch.
With the fire blowing. I don't know if we have anything left to resources. I'm going to just run these roads with a siren and try to get people out of here. Bars spread out. Way behind on evacuation.
The Embercast sends firebrands shooting across the sky, starting new fires.
As about 10 minutes ago was 6,000 acres. Still running hard to the south and spotting. LA Link, I see as soon as you have those first five, get back to me. They're immediate need, please. Why don't you drop on the shoulder? We can keep them from spray on the flag and have to get the evacuation. Yeah, she's going to make a hard run on that. Red Cross is on their way. I will need animal control.
It's all around you, and it doesn't stop.
You have a resident has fire approaching the house. Medical response, 3 ambulance for burn injuries, 2 victims en route. Second and third evacuation egress for all the residents. We're going to have a whole bunch of burned up cars. We're going to have vehicles with people in 40 now active. Multiple structures threatened.
We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
Welcome. We're doing it live. Howdy, everybody. We've got some interesting stuff tonight. So, big news. Karen Bass and the city of Los Angeles are delaying their official report, at least the release of their official report, on the Palisades Fire. Why? Well, the answer may surprise you, or will it? We also have Karen Bass staffers caught on hidden camera blaming the Palisades Fire victims for the fire itself. And then we also have some controversy with the winds on the Palisade Fire. So I posted about the winds, and I just posted some National Weather Service data, and people had a very strong emotional reaction to that. It was very surprising, to be honest. I don't know why people are so emotional about it, but we're going to get into that. Was the Palisades Fire that windy? Was it not? Does wind really matter for a wildfire? What you saw in that opening clip from our film Hot Shot is the result of winds hitting a fire. The answer is wind is not good for wildfires, but there's a lot of nuance in this. And there's a very specific reason why I am harping on the wind speeds on the Palisades Fire. I'm not trying to downplay anything. I'm just trying to combat the upselling of certain things. There's a very specific reason for this. And so the people who are getting really emotional about me pointing out the actual wind speeds, not the advertised wind speeds on the Palisades Fire, you may want to reevaluate what you are doing when you make this argument. And we'll get into that. I know it's a little bit cryptic and confusing, but trust me, we'll hold my hand. We'll walk there. Just as a quick side note, Rambo Van Halen, he's a great follow on Twitter, by the way. And he's got a book that I finally got my hands on, Hollywood Samizdat. It is it's basically a memoir of his work in Hollywood. And if any of you guys follow him, he's got the best stories about the film industry. And because he hasn't doxed himself, he actually tells honest stories. And as someone who's worked in the industry, it is so satisfying to hear his perspective on some of this stuff, because you just get a sense of how weird Hollywood is, how crooked it is, and what a strange but also awesome industry it can be. And so I finally got my grubby hands on this book. Now, I haven't read it yet, but my donkey read it, and he says it's great. So everyone should consider buying this book. I'm not getting paid. This is not like a promotion or paid post or anything. It's just me supporting a homie who I think is awesome. And if any of you guys are into cinema and the film industry, I think you would really like his account, and you for sure love this book. So I just wanted to put that out there. Now, we had a very interesting live stream yesterday. It did really well. Like, a lot of people seem to respond very well to it, and that's good. And it's a little surprising, because I thought it was gonna be the end of me, because we stepped into the minefield of climate change. And I think what we managed to pull off yesterday, and I say we because I include all of you in the comments as well, and people who are commenting right now on Twitter after watching the replay. What we accomplished was we managed to have a discussion about this minefield where nobody can have a rational discussion. And actually found some common ground. And I think we're starting to get into this narrow band where we can have like rational discussions about pollution, the environment, the reality of history and climate and all that, and properly prioritize our needs. The main thing with me and climate change, it's what is that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs? It comes down to prioritizing the things that are the most immediate threat. People in the climate change advocacy areas, they'll always talk about how this is an existential threat. They're always using metaphors like the planet's literally on fire. That's why they love to use wildfire as sort of the resonant image of climate change, because it's sort of like a literal representation of what they're trying to say. Like, it is on fire. It's a 5-alarm fire, but they don't act like it. I've seen people in the middle of a 5-alarm fire. They do not act the way that Leonardo DiCaprio is acting, right? Like, if he really felt this was a 5-alarm fire, he wouldn't be taking private jets. He wouldn't have that fancy yacht, and he wouldn't be using his tanning bed in his massive loft in Manhattan. So, my main issue is with things like the Palisades Fire, it could have been prevented. All this death and destruction could have been prevented with just simple mitigation efforts, like removing fuels, right? The Lemony Snicket series of events that would have to happen in order to reduce carbon from the environment take 50 years, right? It's not going to have a measurable impact, and it's certainly not going to eliminate large fires, because we've had large fires. I was pointing out the big fires that we had in 1871. So obviously, that's not going to guarantee that we're not going to have big fires. But getting rid of plants will do that, and it's something you can do right now. So right now, we actually have red flag warnings going up throughout Southern California, right? We've got red flag warnings coming up. I think they're in effect right now. If you were to go outside and clear brush from around your yard, you could potentially prevent a fire that's about to pop off in the next 2 hours. You could prevent that fire from impacting your home right now, right? There's no climate solution that could have that kind of a payoff. And my big issue is that we just have way bigger priorities right now that we actually have agency over. And we need to focus on those first. I'm tired of seeing our neighborhoods getting wiped out. Now, when we were discussing this yesterday, before I get into that, I just wanted to point out things do tend to come in threes. We're gonna get to that in a minute. But people in Santa Barbara County, I think, should be on alert. Just say that right now. The thing that I tried to point out in our live stream yesterday on climate change is, I think about the generational shift in our perspectives on climate change and the histrionics around it. And you'll notice how we've got like very young cheerleaders for the climate change histrionics. And what I think that is when you're young and you're witnessing geological or climatological cycles that take a long time to unfold, and repeat. And I do believe that everything is cyclical, right? And this is both scientific and it's biblical. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything just sort of keeps happening on repeat, right? We have a lot of cliches about this for a reason. But I imagine like a 30-year fire cycle or a 30-year flood cycle or drought cycle, right? And if you are in your 20s, you're in grad school, you're a blue-haired college student in your 20s, and you see a massive fire like the Woolsey Fire or like the Palisades Fire, then it's really easy for you to think, oh my God, the world is coming to an end. When I was young, all these hills were green and vibrant, and they just got more and more brown. The droughts are increasing, and now it's all on fire. Of course, you would be totally panicked. But then you imagine that person's dad, who's in his 60s, right? So he's seen this 30-year cycle twice. And he can say, well, I used to think the same thing when I was your age. But then I saw it happen again, right? We had this big fire back when I was 30 years old, and then everything got green again. And then that slowly got browner and browner and browner, and it dried out, and then it burned again. So I think this might be a cycle, right? So he's not quite as prone to the histrionics. And then you've got Grandpa, who's 90 years old. He's seen it now 3 times. And he's like, just have a Coke and a smile and shut the fuck up. This happens, right? And so I do think that generational perspective on history, that knowledge of history actually informs how histrionic you are about this stuff. Now, as serendipity would have it, as I was going through some news footage of the Palisades Fire, I found this metaphor in real life. And I want to play this clip.
How long have you lived in the Palisades? And have
I grew up here, 1965.
Wow. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
1979, same fire. Yeah.
So this is a repeat of 1979.
Yep. I think that's the last time that it burned. Yep.
Aaron, we thank you for talking to us, and we're wishing you all the best.
Thank you.
Please stay safe.
Thank you.
Did you guys catch that? Did you catch that? Is this not the exact embodiment of that metaphor? That generational shift in histrionics.
How long have you lived in the Palisades? And have
I grew up here, 1965.
Wow. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
1979, same fire. Yeah.
So this is a repeat of 1979.
Yep. I think that's the last time that it burned. Yep.
Aaron, we thank you for talking to us, and we're wishing you all the best.
Thank you.
Please stay safe.
Look at, dude, you couldn't get a more perfect representation of this, right? You've got a reporter in her 20s who's panicked and shocked by all this. And then you've got this lady in her 60s who grew up in the Palisades, who, have you ever seen anything like this before? And this young reporter wants to hear, oh, this is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this. But she immediately says, yeah, 79, same fire. Same fire. It's the same exact fire is happening again. Does that not perfectly embody that generational change that happens once you start seeing these things over and over? Like I was always saying, the way that they'll always warn us that we're 5 years away from the end of the world. There's only so many times you can hit the snooze button on that before people start catching on, right? And it has to do with how many laps have you done around the sun, right? And this gal who grew up in the Palisades has seen this before. So she's not surprised. And her demeanor in the middle of this catastrophe is quite jovial. Now, this is at 4:27 p.m. So that's 6 hours into the Palisades Fire. At this point, tons of homes have already been nuked. So it's not like this is, it's still early, maybe they're going to catch it. Like, no, this thing is already a catastrophe. Yet she's in good spirits. She's not panicked. She's very calm. And she just very simply says, yeah, I've seen this before. Back in 79 was the last time it burned. Telling you, man. Telling you. The more historical perspective you have, the calmer you are. So when I see histrionics, when I see people panicking, I just immediately know, yeah, they just don't know their history. That's all it comes down to. Now, I posted this. I posted this video, and this on Twitter, this thing blew up. I don't know why. I do not know why this blew up. Now, this video is from November, I believe, of 2024. And this is a small brush fire that ignited right next to the empty San Ynez Reservoir. And this is excellent footage that shows you the empty reservoir. And to me, it's like, dude, God is trying to give you a hint, right? God is trying to give you a hint. He's setting off a fire right next to the fucking empty reservoir. Now, this was a relatively small fire. As you can see, it's got white smoke. It's not doing a whole lot, right? And it didn't. But even for this small fire, they had to truck in water because they couldn't access any water from the helipad here at the reservoir. Why? Well, because it's empty. This reservoir had been empty at this point, I believe, for 10, 11 months. So ultimately, the reservoir ended up being empty for like 13 months because of a tear in the tarp that's supposed to cover it. Now, in this footage, and this is unique, it's a unique perspective because we don't have this footage from the Palisades fire. For some reason, copters weren't getting good overhead footage. And before you say, well, it's because of the winds, I'm going to prove you dead wrong. So don't embarrass yourself. And what you can see is you can see this white band in the reservoir. That's the narrow operational band of the reservoir. The thing is, you don't want to fill it to its entirety because if you fill it too high, then you risk nitrification of the water. So you need to keep it through this narrow band, and you can see where that's at, way higher than just that little bit of pooling water at the bottom. But here's what's interesting about this, man. You get this fire right next to the reservoir. And then a month and a half later, on New Year's Eve, you get the Lockman fire, which we know ultimately ended up being the cause of the Palisades fire itself. So you had 2 strikes, 2 warning shots fired over the Palisades, right? This one, they gave you a month and a half heads up, like, hey man, fire right next to the reservoir, and you need to truck in water to the reservoir fire because it's empty. We call this a clue. And then you have another fire on New Year's Eve, strike number 2. Things tend to come in threes. This is a consistent pattern in the universe. I don't mean to be esoteric, but of course that 3rd strike was the Palisades fire because we did not pay attention. Where else have we seen 2 strikes this year? Where else have we seen 2 strikes this year? Santa Barbara County, right? We had the Madre fire, and then we just had the Gifford fire right next to each other. That's 2 strikes. Now, I've talked about this before, about how you tend to see patterns repeating themselves. And I warned about this previously when we did a stream on the Gifford fire. I'm like, it's sort of got my hackles up. We're seeing that Santa Barbara is clearly receptive, and I mean Santa Barbara County. And we've pointed out certain areas around APS in the Santa Barbara Riviera where I'm very concerned about the amount of fuel loading around there and people's preparation for receiving fire. I'm not making a prediction that you're going to see a bad fire in Santa Barbara. I'm just saying pay attention, right? The Palisades got 2 warning shots before they got their big fire. Santa Barbara County, and you could extend this into San Luis Obispo. They got 2 warning shots, right? The Madre fire and the Gifford fire didn't necessarily do a lot of damage. They burned up a lot of real estate. They didn't do damage. Just like the 2 fires prior to the Palisades fire, I would be on alert if you're in Santa Barbara. And you got to pay attention, even though this fire weather watch is just indicating areas in Los Angeles County. Santa Barbara is a part of this. Santa Barbara County, they're looking at some sundowner winds. They could get some bad stuff. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Sue Thompson, that wasn't what the reporter wanted to hear. That's what's so funny about this clip.
How long have you lived in
It's
the
like
Palisades?
you have this
and
young
I grew up-
reporter who really wanted her to say this is unprecedented, right? That my least favorite word on the planet. And she just didn't give it to her. I love this. I love this perspective. I love how calm she is. And I'm telling you, this was true for me when I was chasing fires. The more time I spent on fires, the more I saw, the more calm I would get. Just because once you've seen it, you sort of know what to expect. That confidence actually is, it's really powerful. Now, as far as the reservoir goes, and wasting water. Before we get into this next segment, Daniel Firecopter is saying we could have seen helicopters filling up right there if it weren't empty for this fire and the Lockman fire. That is 100% correct. And when I was on the 2019 Palisades Fire, which was, it looked like it was going to get really spicy, but fortunately they managed to catch it and it didn't do too much damage. But when I was on that fire, I remember watching the copters landing on the flat part of the reservoir at their helispot, there on the left. They're landing there, filling up, and then going and fighting fire. And it was a massive air show. Those copters did a lot of damage on that fire. See that big chunk of concrete on the front left? That's where they would be landing and filling up. They don't dip out of the San Ynez Reservoir. They land at the helispot, they fill up, and then they take off. That's generally what pilots prefer to do, which I can understand. I don't know how they hover. I really don't know how they do that. I've heard that flying a helicopter is like trying to balance on a beach ball in water, right? You've got your feet going, you've got both hands doing stuff. To me, like, these guys are freaking studs. I don't know how they do this. But on this topic of the lack of water, any of you guys firefighters in here, can you tell me what is happening here?
I get confirmation from them, but they've got multiple fire trucks out here doing what they do best. So
what's happening here? This is 5 hours into the Palisades Fire. So this is at 3:26. And I don't know, doesn't it look like this engine is just spewing water all over the street onto the concrete? What are they doing? Why are they wasting all that water? I don't know that I've ever seen this. I've seen water tenders do this, like when they have to, like when there's fire on the ground, like they're near some vegetation. I've never seen them do this on a street. Can anyone tell me why they're doing this? This seems like a crazy waste of water. Man. Ken says, it doesn't have to be the fire weather watch area. With the right wind and terrain and time, it could easily spread. This is 100% correct. And by the way, we are going to talk about this, okay? We are going to get to that because we need to talk about the winds on the Palisades Fire. Now, before we get to that, somebody sent me this, it was a James O'Keefe thing. Now, James O'Keefe is sort of infamous for doing hidden camera investigative work. And, you know, some of it can be pretty dubious. But here's the thing, man. Okay. When you're not a subject matter expert on something, you tend to be very vulnerable to influence, right? You tend to buy into conspiracy theories. Like, if you don't know anything about wildfire, it's very easy to see theories about, like, oh, if you've got a blue roof, then it's not going to burn. Okay, right? People can sort of fool you into thinking this kind of stuff. But if you know anything about fires, you know, yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. I used to be that guy who I bought into all the conspiracy theories. And I used to be a big climate change activist too. And then once I got into wildfire and I started learning a bit more about fuels and fire suppression and just the different variables that lead to big catastrophic fires, I started to realize just how banal the reality is. And I stopped, not only did I stop indulging in conspiracy theories of all kinds, because I realized, I'm like, okay, the wildfire conspiracy theories seem dumb to me now because I know a bit about wildfire. What about all the other subjects that I know nothing about? Like weather, right? I should probably reconsider those because people like Rich Thompson, right? Or Phil Cunningham, when they see like a weather thing, a weather conspiracy theory, they're just like shaking their heads because they know better and they know how stupid it is. Now, the thing is, when you see some of these like hidden camera things and they're busting somebody or it's on a topic that you know a lot about, it starts becoming a little more sus because you can see where there's a little bit of deception. But I want to play this whole video and we'll cut into it because they caught one of Karen Bass's employees and an employee of the Los Angeles Department of Water Power saying some stuff that is more than suspect. But there's also some stuff that's, you know, I think it's a little bit unfair. So we're going to get into this. And like I always try to do, I'm going to try to shoot you as straight as I possibly can. Phil is saying we're going to talk about wins. Yes, Phil, we are going to talk about wins, daggone it. But first, we're going to talk about some hidden camera investigative journalism.
Boz discloses into our hidden camera that Mayor Karen Bass's office knew these wildfires would happen and admits there was nothing the mayor's office could do to stop the fires.
They really had no idea this fire was like a possibility.
Of course they did. The thing is, there's nothing they can do. But red flag warnings, like, it's been a big indication of fires.
Yeah.
So of course they did.
Currently.
Now, I wanted to point out this part. You know, look, first off, if you get caught on hidden camera, it doesn't even matter what you're doing. It automatically just sort of looks bad, right? You could say anything and it kind of just, because you're being investigated in the first place, it sort of automatically puts this aura of suspicion over you. So, you know, I want to try to be as fair to this guy as possible. But what they're doing is, what James O'Keefe will do, he will hire babes to troll Tinder and other dating apps and try to lure in people who they recognize as people in positions of authority. And it's usually, it's going to be a gal who's like way out of their league. So that way, when he lands a date with this super hot babe, who she's just going to play dumb and pretend like she doesn't know him, but ask him a bunch of very obvious questions about his work, he's going to spill his guts because that's what stupid guys do when they're on dates. But just as an aside, anyone who's on camera, on hidden camera, is already going to look kind of suspect. So let's just keep that in mind as we go. I'm going to try to give this guy a fair shake, but we're going to torture him if he deserves it. But what gets caught here is really interesting. So let's just watch.
Boz discloses into our hidden camera that Mayor Karen Bass's office knew these wildfires would happen and admits there was nothing the mayor's office could do to stop the fires.
They really had no idea this fire was like a possibility.
Of course they did. The thing is, there's nothing they can do. But red flag warnings, like, it's been a big indication of fires.
Yeah.
So of course they did.
Now, is that bad? He's admitting that they knew the fires were a risk. Now, he's not saying that, like, oh yeah, we knew the fires were going to start. We knew this was going to risk. Like, anytime there's a red flag warning, yeah, you know there's going to be risk of fires. Like, that's what we're talking about right now with the National Weather Service. Red flag warning means, yeah, you know there could be a risk of fire. And he's saying there's nothing they can do. That part I have a problem with. There's still something you can do. Now, you can't prevent ignition. So that's true. You can't do anything to prevent all these ignitions because sometimes they just happen. Now, certain things you can do, you can shut down the power and you can prevent power line ignitions. That sometimes works. But for the most part, some of these things you can't necessarily prevent. But to say that there's nothing you can do, that is disingenuous bullshit, right? There is something you can do. And obviously, the thing that we would do in retrospect, and I would say, you know, any competent fire chief would look at the fact that you had a fire in the Palisades just a few days ago. Maybe you prioritize putting a strike team up there, up in the Highlands. Just keep an eye on that thing. Hey, remember the Oakland Hills fire back in the 90s? Remember when that thing rekindled and then killed a whole bunch of people and burned down the Oakland Hills? This is a thing that happens. Maybe we should just monitor any recent burn scars. That's where we'll prioritize putting our strike teams. They didn't do that. They didn't pre-deploy anything to the Palisades. I don't think it's too much of an expectation that people anticipate that risk, right? I know you have to try to guess where to pre-deploy your assets. That to me seems like the most obvious place to do it, would be in the Palisades Highlands.
Currently, Alexander Boz from the Los Angeles Mayor's Office works with the victims of the LA wildfires. Boz goes on to blame the spreading of the fires on the residents for their, quote, homes being out of code. Boz also saying, quote, nobody gave a fuck.
How was that day with the fires and helping people?
It was okay. It's just crazy, like, seeing these, because these people, like, they've literally, like, they've lost everything. Like, people are, like, literally breaking down into tears while we're, like, just trying to sign them in and, like, get them, like, the service that they need.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just really bad.
Victims from Palisades or everybody?
Everybody.
Palisades, everybody.
But the other thing too, like with this fire, like a lot of the houses there, so like they were out of, like their yards were out of code.
Out of what?
Out of code. Like nobody gave them. I don't know, like this is like a long time like waiting to happen. It was just like a taking time bomb. But like the houses, like they're supposed to be like a certain amount of feet apart too. It just wasn't built the way it should have been.
What do we think about that? What do you think about what he just said? Now, James O'Keefe is framing it like this guy is blaming the Palisades Fire victims for the fire itself. And in a way, he kind of is. He's saying the responsibility is on the homeowners who didn't do their brush clearance. They're not up to code. Now, is that true? Largely, yeah. It's actually kind of true that a lot of homeowners did not properly clear their brush. That part is true. But how do we feel about him putting all the blame on them, right? And notice the other thing that he said, these homes were too close together. Now, I don't think that's necessarily blaming the fire victims, but what do we think about that? Were these homes too close together? Well, look, every fire expert says yes. And that it's just like how when you have an uninterrupted bed of fuels out in the wildlands, you're not going to stop that thing, right? You have to disrupt it. You have to have a fuel break. The same thing applies to homes. You have to have more separation. Now, the thing is, we can get mad at him for saying that because it sounds like maybe, oh, he's blaming the people for having their homes where they are. I think that's too reductive. And remember, what is the other big controversy that we're dealing with on the Palisades Fire in the post-fire aftermath? We're dealing with corrupt politicians who want to add high-density housing in the rubble of the Palisades Fire. Now, this seems like a very cut and dry argument against high-density housing. So if there already was a problem with housing being too dense in the Palisades and that creating an uninterrupted bed of fuels, we cannot add more density. And I've said this repeatedly, that I believe the city should be purchasing some of these lots that people are putting up for sale because they either don't have it in them to rebuild, they don't have the resources, or they want to get out and they want a fresh, clean slate. I feel like the city should be stepping in, purchasing these lots and turning them into dog parks. That way you disrupt some of that mosaic of homes as fuels, and you can have areas that are good fuel breaks, removing one of the dominoes, so that way when the next time the fire pushes through, it's not knocking over every single domino. And then it's also a nice community space where people can, take their kids, take their dogs. I really believe that somebody should be looking into doing that. Now, of course, we don't trust the city officials to properly maintain that property because why? Well, we've seen what they do. Now, part of the frustrating thing about that dude blaming the residents for not clearing their brush, whether or not that's true, the city wasn't clearing their own brush. We saw this in Alexander Robertson's lawsuit, which is the lead lawsuit in the Palisades Fire. This is a city-owned lot, which is basically just a fallowed field of dead brush and dead grasses, just sitting there waiting to burn. And then what happens? Well, you had a spot fire start right in this lot and then burn to adjacent properties. And the thing is, these lots surrounding these city-owned lots where they failed to live up to their own code. These people actually did their brush clearance. And you can kind of see it at the edge of this picture. The homes around them did their brush clearance for the most part. These people down here didn't, or they were just too close to the city-owned lots where they didn't actually have anything to clear, right? It was just city-owned lot right behind them. And so then the spot fire that landed right here then spread to these properties, burned down homes, and then you continue that chain reaction because these homes are sending up embers into their neighbors, and it was just one after another after another. So if we're going to criticize the residents, well, then the city has to live up to the same standards. I hate this whole rules for thee and not for me kind of bullshit.
Boss discloses into our hidden camera has said that President Trump's order to release water from the Central Valley.
They're supposed to be like a certain amount of feet apart too. It just wasn't built the way it should have been.
The official inside the mayor's office said that President Trump's order to release water from the Central Valley in California was, quote, dumb and not real.
Trump turned the water back on through the military. That was unbelievable, but
Yeah.
So, people believe that shit. I didn't think it was funny. I thought it was dumb.
It was dumb?
Yeah.
That he's giving us water?
No.
Do you think that's real?
It's not dumb. All I know is there's a lot of misinformation coming out from TikTok.
Honestly, the most offensive thing about this guy is the way that he eats. Dude, he eats like a freaking animal. What is he doing? Phil Cunningham says, houses closer than 25 to 30 feet together is bad. I shared some experiments being done by IBHS there yesterday. Spacing greater than 30 feet dramatically reduces heat flux from a burning house to its neighbors. This is 100% correct. We do need less density. We need less density, both in the wildlands and in the wildland-urban interface, okay? So this is like one of the main arguments, besides just the cultural and philosophical argument against higher density housing in these communities. We need less density. We need less density. That's why we need to be buying up some of these lots and just putting some nice green grass and some agave on it, you know? But back to what this dude is saying about, you know, Trump releasing the water being stupid. It is stupid because it's not a thing. You know, President Trump has some good insight into problems in California, like they need to rake the forest, okay? I know we all made fun of him for saying it because he said it in a goofy way, but he is 100% right. We got to get rid of some of the fuels. We got to do more fuel mitigation in California. Everybody knows this. It's only people who have their brains warped by political tribalism who oppose that, and they shot themselves in the foot, right? Ever since he said it back in 2018, if we had actually been raking the forests in California, how many communities could have been saved? Like Grizzly Flats. Grizzly Flats, they had a forest raking project prescribed by the U.S. Forest Service that got hung up for 10 years and never got done. And because of that, when the Calder fire burned, it burned down the entire community. And that plan got stalled out because of environmental regulations and environmental NGOs suing the U.S. Forest Service because they wanted to rake the forest and get rid of some of the vegetation. And of course, we can't destroy any vegetation because it's more important than the fucking people. But this whole thing about releasing water, it got conflated with the issue of the empty reservoir, which is a real issue. There's a real problem on this fire. Now, the main reason why it was a problem wasn't necessarily for the fire hydrants itself. Because as we saw, remember with that clip that I showed you earlier where it looked like the engine was wasting water? And I'm trying to understand what the fuck they're doing. This is at 3:30 in the afternoon. Clearly, there's still plenty of water. And the hydrants didn't go dry until later. The main issue with that reservoir being empty was that helicopters couldn't use that helispot. And they had to fly way farther away to get water, which took them out of the fire zone during the most critical point of control, which is early on in the incident where the helicopters were the only resources there. And that was their only chance of slowing down or stopping this thing. And they couldn't do it because they had to spend so much time running to go get water over at 69 Bravo in Malibu or at Pepperdine, instead of just picking up right here, traveling half a mile, and then just ripping laps. They could have had a conveyor belt of water over that initial attack. That's the main issue with the reservoir being empty. President Trump has been on this weird kick where he has like created this, again, I think he's conflating issues. There is an issue with California mismanaging their water and denying it to farmers in the Central Valley. That actually is a real problem. But Trump keeps conflating it with the fire thing. And there's no like spigot that he could turn where all of a sudden water's gonna rush into Southern California and then the fires are gonna stop. That's not how any of this stuff works. So I think it's important that he maybe stop conflating these things because it is kind of dumb. But the way this guy says it, it just sort of makes it sound like, you know, he doesn't want people to have water. I also think it's kind of an unfair attack. That's not what he's saying. He's just saying this idea that there's some magical spigot and that's the reason why the reservoirs were empty. That's not why the reservoirs are empty. We're gonna see that when they bust the LADWP employee. The reason why the reservoir was empty is because of just horrible bureaucratic incompetence.
Boss discloses into our hidden cameras that the water...
All I know is there's a lot of misinformation coming out from TikTok.
Now, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power project manager admitted to us into our hidden cameras that the water reservoir that services Pacific Palisades was empty for nearly a year. Angel Luna also stated that the water wouldn't have made a big impact for the residents of Los Angeles.
It's like everybody's just kind of like, what happened?
So that reservoir, we took it out of service because there was a tear like on the floating cover, which is like, I don't know, it's like $1 billion or so because of that floating cover to repair or something like that. But then like that, the cover's rated for like 25 years.
How long was the reservoir empty?
It's like a year. Also, even though like let's say we had like a little bit of notice, you can't slam fill the reservoir. You can't just like, oh, we got water.
So it's just, I guess, like people ask questions like, oh, like, could it have been different if there was water in the reservoir?
I don't think it would have made that big of an impact because of the fact that you lost so many homes.
So is there not enough water? Like,
oh, there's enough water.
I just want to pick up on a couple things that he's saying. Do you see how casually he said this thing's been out of commission for a year? Now, he's explaining that, again, the reason why the San Ynez Reservoir was out of service wasn't because of some spigot that Gavin Newsom forgot to turn on or something. There was tear. There was a tear in the floating cover. And apparently you need that floating cover for health and safety reasons, to prevent animals, like dead animals, from falling into the reservoir and plant debris and stuff like that. I'm not a water expert, but that is the general reason why you need that floating cover. And there was a tear in it. And because government is so incompetent, what they did was they just drained the reservoir while they were waiting for that cover to get fixed. Because, okay, if you don't have a functional cover, it could potentially poison the water. Okay, we'll just accept that because, I can't say anything to that. I'm not a water expert. My question is, okay, if you can't use that water for drinking water, for municipal water supply, and the municipal water supply isn't actually dependent on that reservoir because they're still using the main trunk line to fill those tanks around the neighborhood, why couldn't they keep some water in that just for firefighting, right? So who cares if animals are falling into it and it's no good? Just shut it off from getting into the municipal water supply, but leave some water in there so that way you have a dip site, right? Or you have a heli spot for just this kind of circumstance. That is what I don't understand. The other part of it is just look how casually he says, oh, it was offline for a year. Like, this is acceptable. Both reservoirs in the Palisades were empty, right? The other one, the Chautauqua Reservoir, that has been offline for 13 years. How is this acceptable? This is why I always say, like, government they love the unprecedented stuff because it gets them off the hook. They love your conspiracy theories because it blinds you from the plain reality that it's just straight up bureaucratic incompetence. That's the biggest threat to your life. They had a 100-foot tear in a fucking tarp and they couldn't get it fixed for 13 months. And the only reason it got done in that 13th month is because of the fire and all this scrutiny, which, figuratively and literally lit a fire under their ass to finally get it done. Like, they were emailing the contractor on day 2 of the Palisades Fire, the morning of January 8th. They were emailing the contractor saying, hey, we'd like to reprioritize getting this thing done. Unbelievable.
Like, we took it out of service because there was a tear like on the floating cover, which is like, I don't know, it took like $1 billion or so because of that floating cover to repair or something like that. But then the cover's rated for like 25 years.
How long was the reservoir empty?
It's like a year. Also, even though like let's say we had like a little bit of notice, you can't slam fill the reservoir. You can't just like, oh, we got water.
So it's just, I guess, like people ask questions like, oh, like, could it have been different if there was water in the reservoir?
I don't think it would have made that big of an impact because of the fact that you lost so many homes.
So is there not enough?
He's saying it wouldn't have made a big impact because you lost. Now, look, it is true that when you lose a bunch of homes, all their plumbing gets severed and they're just leaking like a sieve. And so you're going to lose water pressure no matter what. That part is true. But this idea that the water wouldn't have made a difference. I'm going to keep saying this. Early on in the firefight, when the copters are the only resource attacking the fire and they are your most effective weapon, and they're going to buy time for crews to get up there and start cutting this thing out and getting an anchor on it. Those copters were basically rendered mostly inoperable, not by the winds, not by some unprecedented climatic conditions and weather conditions, but because that reservoir was empty. As he's sipping his little cocktail, just casually saying, it wouldn't have made a difference. How do we keep getting away with saying this? Of course it would have made a difference. If you could have these helicopters on 2-minute laps, they had 4 helicopters on the fire right away within like 12 minutes. And then another 3 from LA County shortly thereafter. So you want to tell me that if they had 7 copters ripping laps on 2-minute cycles, that they might not have knocked the piss out of this thing? I'm going to show you some footage that you guys haven't seen before with a really good perspective on the initial attack. That's going to show you just how manageable this fire would have been if the copters could have been able to drop water with a high rate of return. You stay tuned for that. You haven't seen this footage before.
Oh, there's enough water.
There is enough water.
I have more than enough water.
Could they have been more prepared?
Kind of, because it's like it's a continual thing. But it's like the winds hit pretty hard this year.
See what he's doing? He's blaming it on the fucking winds. Oh yeah, maybe there's something we could do, but hey, the winds hit pretty hard this year. We've never had Santa Ana winds before. This is why I harp on the whole unprecedented thing. I'm not trying to just shit on climate change histrionic people. I'm trying to remind you guys, government always uses this to cover up. It's their get out of jail free card. Oh, we couldn't do our job. There's nothing we could do. She asked, could you have been more prepared? Well, yeah, it's kind of a continual thing. What's a continual thing? The fire threat? Does that not include Santa Ana winds, which basically always surface? The only question is, did you get your precipitation, your season-ending precipitation in Southern California before they hit, right? Did you get your cold November rains, Axl Rose, before the Santa Anas hit? That's really what matters. And of course, this last year, they did not, right? They didn't get that season-ending rain in November like we always do. Not always, it's very rare. But he's immediately blaming it on the winds. It's not us. Like, what could we have done? It's the winds. What the fuck does that have to do with filling the reservoir? What do the winds have to do with fixing a fucking tarp within 13 months? Absolutely nothing. But you see every single person in this entire chain of command, right, throughout every sort of, bureaucratic agency that's involved in trying to support a community and protect the community and provide services for a community, they're all using this excuse of unprecedented winds. I'm going to tear that shit apart.
We weren't expecting this.
Obviously, you think it could have helped if there was water in the fire hydrants.
They were also breaking our equipment.
I mean, yeah, I think everyone's just like, okay, we need more water. I don't know.
Yeah, but
I know, so I guess
we live in a desert.
He's talking out of two sides of his mouth, right? 10 seconds ago, he was saying, I have more than enough water. And now he's saying, well, we live in a desert. You see how he's just trying to dodge accountability for anything? So on one hand, he says, we have more than enough water. And that's actually true. And this is another point that I always bring up to all the alarmists. This is why I say never trust panic. So everybody who's freaking out during the drought years, everyone was freaking. You see all these histrionic articles in the New York Times and Washington Post where they're talking about the lake levels at Lake Tahoe. I'm like, guys, yes, it's a fucking drought. California used to get like 200-year-long droughts. This is normal. It's gonna come back. And then sure enough, you get 2 years of absolutely monster rain. Every single reservoir, except for the Palisades, is overflowing with water. This always happens, dude. This is why, I am becoming that old man who's just saying to have a Coke and a smile and shut the fuck up. It's gonna be fine, okay? Never trust panic. On a long enough timeline, everything balances out. But what this guy is trying to do is trying to balance out his bullshit by playing both sides. He's saying, oh, I got more than enough water. That's not the issue. We also live in a desert. California gets a ton of rain. And the thing is, he was right to say he's got more than enough water. Dude, the reservoirs are full. They're still full. Except for when we deliberately drain them.
It's on right here.
This was Angel Luna's first date with her undercover journalist, and oddly, he revealed he was ignoring his mandatory LADWP training for the Water Emergency Command.
This is where it gets pretty bad.
The training teaches him what to do in emergency situations. Luna goes on to say he did the training after the LA wildfires occurred, and he admitted that he doesn't do his job.
So it's the Water Emergency Command Center, and it's an incident command system. Structure, which it's something there's something that I was ignoring earlier this year. They're like, oh, here's your training, right? I was like, yeah, thanks. Did you do it? No boss. All right, cool. Yeah.
Oh, so you guys had a training?
Yeah. So and I got a reminder, even though I'm a supervisor and told all right, on top of everything else I'm doing, I got to do this. So I gave it the college trials, this is super dry because a robot voice is reading this to me. So all right, yeah, I tried doing it. I was like, I'm gonna just print it out. I'm gonna try doing the test at the end, so I can just do it. I was like, no, it didn't work, right? But then after getting thrown into it and seeing what it is in real time, it's like, oh, now all this makes sense.
How badly do you want to punch this dude? He was talking about basically the critical incident management protocols. And he's just like, I'm going to read that. And then once the fire hit, I was like, oh, that's why we need to train on this stuff. This is what I'm saying, guys. Forget the space lasers. Forget the fucking climate change excuses. People like this, either incompetent or just scumbag bureaucrats, are the biggest threat to your life. Always. Do you guys understand why I always say this? You guys, while you guys are focused on fucking Teslas and solar panels, this asshole is throwing out his handbook on how to deal with a critical incident.
I went back and did all of them.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Were you guys
after the
required to do that type of stuff?
After the fact, these fucking guys. Oh my God, dude. This drives me fucking crazy. Now, on that note, if we're going to hold people accountable, what has to happen? You have to have an investigation. Now, I feel like we've done a pretty damn good job on this show, Man on Fire, investigating all of this stuff and trying to bring it to you straight. Okay? That's what I always try to do. What is this? This just came out. After action report on the Palisades Fire to be held as federal investigation continues. Federal officials have not said when they expect to complete their investigation. They have completed their investigation. They have. They won't say it, but I know this. I know what's in their investigation. It's complete. The ATF report has been transferred to the Department of Justice. It's been transferred to the Department of Justice. And this is where this hubbub is coming from now. Los Angeles officials will release an after-action report on the Palisades Fire after federal investigators complete their investigation into the matter, Mayor Karen Bass announced Tuesday. Upon conclusion of the investigation, the after-action report will be released in coordination with the United States Department of Justice. So the ATF has submitted their report to DOJ. And now it seems like DOJ is requesting that Karen Bass not release her report. Well, here's the thing, man. We have a Republican who hates California and hates Karen Bass in charge of the federal government. And then we've got Karen Bass, a communist, who hates Donald Trump, hates the president, hates the feds. Why would she delay her after-action report? Why would she listen to Donald Trump and delay her after-action report? Seems weird, right? Does anyone have any theories on why that would be? Now, this news organization, which is NBC, they say it's unclear when exactly the federal investigation is expected to be completed. This shows how incompetent these news organizations are. The federal investigation is complete. It's complete. How do I know that? But they don't. The Hall report's release is to avoid interference with the ongoing federal investigation, according to Bass. How would that interfere? Why can't she do an after-action report? Does she know something that's in the federal investigation? What does she know? And why would she delay it? Now, people are saying like, well, she really wants to control the narrative on this fire because everyone suspects, okay, she did something wrong. She's screwed. She did something wrong. Why would she delay her report if she wants to control the narrative? Wouldn't she push that first? Wouldn't she want to get like the first blow? Like, dude, the feds keep delaying the release of this stuff to the public, even though we know what's in it. They keep delaying it. So why would she delay hers? This is her opportunity to scoop them. I don't understand. Do you guys have any idea why she might do that? Casey says they're trying to downplay the LA responsibility, so Bass will hold up her report if the feds will tone down their report. So politics. That's an interesting theory. They say in this, although a cause for the fire has not been determined, it has. Local and federal arson investigators said last month that they had narrowed the scope to a main theory on how it began. What do you think that is? It's still unclear if the blaze was set intentionally or accidentally. Okay. It was not set intentionally. Okay. And again, I don't know how do I know more about this stuff than NBC? They do not have good sources. So why would Karen Bass want to comply with the federal government and delay her report? Here's my theory. My theory is that the feds are going to end up blaming someone or some agency that is immune from liability. Therefore, there is no criminal prosecution. There is no criminal liability. And there won't be a criminal referral. I think Karen Bass is going to be relieved, or is relieved, that that's the case. I think they're going to end up putting this on an agency that perhaps has already seen some accountability. Like maybe their fire chief got fired. Maybe they're going to put it on them. And then Karen Bass is like, oh, well, now I look special. I already fired the chief of the LA Fire Department. Now she's going to look great. Now everybody can just sort of put it on the person who already got kicked out. Oh, this is on the LAFD. It's their fault. They screwed up. And you know what? They're immune. And we already fired the chief. There's already been accountability. Man, Karen Bass is so smart. She got rid of that fire chief so early. In fact, that's the only person who's seen any accountability. That's my theory. I don't know if that's true. That's just my theory. My theory is that she has seen that the people who are responsible are people who can't be held responsible. And there's not going to be any criminal charges. So what that means is Alexander Robertson's lawsuit, the lead lawsuit for the Palisades Fire victims, that is the only shot we have at getting any accountability on this fire. For all these corrupt assholes, these incompetent morons who are in charge of all this stuff. Alexander Robertson's lawsuit and, thereby proxy Spencer Pratt's lawsuit as well. Those are two separate lawsuits. I think that's going to be our only shot at getting any kind of accountability, because I don't think criminal charges are going to come. Even though there's gross negligence, I don't think it's going to fall into that category. That's just my theory. If you guys have any other theory of why Karen Bass would comply with Donald Trump and not put out her report, I am all ears. All ears. Now, let's start hacking away at the thing that stirred up so many people. Do I have this? Here. This was the post that drove people crazy. Look at these unprecedented hurricane force winds on the Palisades Fire. Now, obviously, I'm being facetious. You don't dude, the palm fronds are barely stirring. Now, how is this possible? We have some meteorologists in the chat. Maybe they can, weather experts, maybe they can tell us why this is. Now, this is 2 hours into the incident. So this thing is already cranking, and yet it is totally windstill. How is this possible? We were told that they had hurricane force winds over this fire, and that's why they couldn't have aircraft attacking it. What does this look like to you? Now, people freaked out over this tweet, and people had some very emotional reactions to it. Now, I'm not sure why. Dude, I'm not saying the Palisades didn't burn down. We know it burned down. We know that it was a brutal fire. I'm literally showing you a video from the scene, showing what's going on. Yeah, there's no wind here, right? It's certainly not hurricane force winds. So why do we keep hearing that there were hurricane force winds? Now, look, I know that the winds, they weren't like this everywhere, and they picked up throughout the evening. But here's the thing. It never reached the threshold that people seem to believe that it did. And some of the people who are getting mad at me are people who claim that they live in the Palisades and that they endured it. I've never seen anything like this. The winds were so crazy. I get that. I understand that you maybe felt like the winds were intense, and I'm sure there were moments where it was. But the numbers do not lie. This is from the National Weather Service. They clocked the highest gust of wind in the Palisades at 38 miles per hour at 6:30 p.m. That means none of the winds before that, so that's 8 hours into the fire. At this point, not only had the fire reached the Pacific Ocean, but half the neighborhood had already burned down. Okay? And yet the gnarliest wind gust that they had was 38 miles per hour. Now, Phil makes a very good point. Winds have spatial variability. Oh my God, it's almost like terrain might affect the winds. Now, here's the thing, man. Like, I understand these people who are getting really defensive. Like, I was there, the winds were so bad, Here's the thing. I've been on fires that had legitimate 70 to 85 mile per hour winds on them. Okay, that was the Kincaid fire up in Sonoma. That was the Silverado fire down in Orange County. The Saddle Ridge fire. There were some clips of the Saddle Ridge fire in this opening. I'm gonna pull this up. I'm gonna mute it. I'm gonna try to find some of this stuff. Now that's from Vacaville. That was the Hennessy fire. This is the Bond fire in Orange County. Some pretty nasty winds on that. I think like 50 miles per hour. That was the Mineral fire. That wasn't necessarily a wind-driven fire. And then let's see. That was the Cave fire in Santa Barbara. That was some pretty gnarly sundowner winds. That was the Saddle Ridge. It's Mineral fire. This stuff towards the end, that's the Kincaid fire. Just so you know, that's the Kincaid fire right there. That little fire whirl, a giant fire whirl running across the plain, that's what it looks like when 85 mile per hour winds are surfacing over your fire. Just so you know the difference. That's not even that wasn't a gnarly wind. That was pretty bad. This is Saddle Ridge fire. That's 60 mile per hour gusts. Okay? Saddle Ridge. So the Saddle Ridge had 60 mile per hour gusts on it, and it was gnarly, right? This last shot will show you just how bad the winds are. Turn the homes into a blast furnace. That's what 50 to 60 mile per hour winds look like on a fire, okay? Just so you're square. That's not 50 mile per hour winds. That's like maybe 40. So here's the thing to understand. When we see that there were 38 mile per hour gusts on the Palisades fire, even though that number may not excite you, that is plenty for a gnarly, devastating fire. Trust me, 38 miles an hour is no joke when it comes to wildfire, but it's not hurricane force. Now, why are we trying to split hairs on this? Why does this matter? We'll get to that. More evidence. Look at the variability, right? So it's not just spatial variability, but regional variability. A lot of the weather stations that you were seeing reports from, Santa Clarita, Magic Mountain Truck Trail, where it's like they're getting 80 mile per hour gusts and they conflate it all. Gavin Newsom was doing this all the time. It's like, we're getting 80 mile per hour gusts in the area. Well, in the fire area or in Southern California as an area, because that's massive. And there are microclimates, even in like a 1 mile radius, even in the Palisades. And I'm going to show you a bunch of videos where we're going to see both sides of this. We're going to see things are totally wind still, and then other areas where it's just cranking, all in the same shot. So you can understand this. And even here on this map, you can see, like, look, in Anaheim, it's 16 miles per hour. Santa Clarita, 51. 22 in Thousand Oaks. Look at the variability there just in this region. Now, a lot of the weather stations that we rely on to tell us about, like, the Malibu area, it's Boney Peak is one of the stations that's reporting these wind gusts, and Boney Peak was getting, I think, like 61 mile per hour gusts. So it might be tempting to say, well, that's Malibu. Yeah, Malibu was getting 61 mile per hour gusts. The fire was in Malibu. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Boney Peak is 20 miles away from the Palisades. The idea that just because you're getting winds over here, that means the same thing was happening in the Palisades because it's all in Southern California? Give me a break, dude. That's not how this works. So what we saw in that James O'Keefe video and what we see from the LADWP, they make this excuse all the time. Look at this. This is from the LADWP. They said, the fire's swift spread led to extraordinary demands on the Westgate trunk line. Given wind conditions at the time, firefighters could not fight the fire by air. That is a lie. Do you understand why I am harping on this so much? right? If you're wondering why I'm dying on this hill of telling you guys the winds were not as bad as they're saying, it's because of this. And you heard it in James O'Keefe video. You see it in LADWP's own defense of their failures on the Palisades fire. They're saying, given wind conditions at the time, firefighters could not fight the fire by air. So they used water drawn solely from the trunk line. This is false. Copters, not only could they fly, they were flying. We had 2 super scoopers on the fire. We had something like 7 copters there within the first 20 minutes. They just had to go really far away to go get water. Do you see how they use this lie? This is why every time you yell at me for just pointing out numbers don't lie, dude. It was 38 miles an hour. Again, plenty for a devastating fire, but it's also within the margins for operating aircraft. The LADWP loves it when you get mad at me for saying that they didn't have hurricane force winds in the Palisades, because it gets them off the hook. They can say, oh yeah, that guy who's yelling at Gabriel's Twitter post about the winds, that guy, see, he's right. It was like a hurricane in there. They use this as an excuse. They're not doing it because they're trying to validate your experience on the fire. They're doing it because it gets them off the hook. Now, the Eaton fire was a completely different story, by the way. Eaton fire had 70-mile-per-hour winds. The other thing you have to remember, a lot of these weather stations are too high up. Now, when I was on fires like the Kincaid fire, the thing that I did realize is, as much as I maybe wanted to believe that there were 85 to 100-mile-per-hour winds surfacing over the fire, like was advertised in the news, my experience on the ground was way different, okay? Here's the difference. You get ridgetop winds that are considerably higher than the winds that actually surface over the fire, okay? Now, those ridgetop winds are still going to affect the fire. It's still going to have an impact. It's still going to send firebrands deeper across. You're going to get long-range spotting because of it. But in terms of those winds that are exacerbating the fire on the ground, a lot of times those advertised winds from these weather stations, they're not actually what's surfacing over the fire. And we know this because of video evidence. Here's what it looked like. Now, this is early on in the initial attack. This is when the fire was still small. What do you see here? Just look at the vegetation. Does it look like the winds are cranking? There's a slight breeze. What about here? Now, this is right outside my grandmother's apartment. It's on the corner of Sunset, PCH, Edgewater Towers. It's where my grandma used to live. How does this look to you? How does that look to you? Does it look like the winds are absolutely howling? Like, I don't see the trees moving at all, do you? That's not even, like, that's not, and look, super scoopers, aircraft. Are you going to believe the LADWP? Or are you going to believe your lying eyes? Daniel Firecopter, I literally watched the air traffic all day on the fire. Air tankers, super scoopers, helicopters were able to fly the Palisades fire, but on the Eaton fire at night, the helicopters couldn't. Who are you going to trust? Daniel is an actual fire copter. He speaks their literal language. He can speak to these aircraft. And he was watching them all day, like we all were. LADWP is lying, saying that aircraft could not fly because of the hurricane force winds. Here's on Palisades Drive / Sunset in that cluster F of an evacuation. Look at the vegetation. He even zooms in. Look at those cattails. Do you see hurricane force winds surfacing over this fire? This looks pretty docile, to be perfectly honest. Now, you have spots, like you saw those palm trees on fire. Now, here, this is a good perspective. It's cranking over here. This is how you can have people who are maybe like on the fringes of this fire, getting absolutely ripping winds, watching this unfold and then yelling at me like, oh, the winds were cranking. This is blowing pretty good. This is maybe 30-mile-per-hour gusts, maybe slightly less. And I know that maybe sounds like, no, that's not enough. It's cranking. Guys, I lived in canyon country for years. We would routinely get 40-mile-per-hour winds. And it sort of felt like the world was going to come to an end. You know, it'd knock over our trash cans all the time. Like I said, 38 miles per hour is plenty for massive fire. But look at this. This is a great shot, by the way. Okay, so right here, right in front of the camera, you see the winds cranking through this tree. Probably 25, 30 mile per hour gusts. But now look as we pan. And more importantly, as we zoom out and then zoom back in at the corner of Pali High. Look when we zoom back in. Do you see the same motion in those trees down there? Not even remotely. There is so much variability on where, when, how winds surface. And depending on the contours of your terrain, you'll get eddies, and that's going to change the way that the wind behaves. You're also going to get areas where it channels the winds. And all of these trees and these buildings, they also act to disrupt the wind. Now, that can create their own eddies. It can create all, weird little swirls and different patterns, but it can also disrupt the winds to a point where it's not quite so crazy, right? Now,
this morning, no one thought this would be on the beach, but it has crossed over PCH, as we've seen already. David. Yeah.
Notice what she just said. It's already reached the beach, okay? So they're reporting on the wind conditions on the fire when it has already reached the Pacific Ocean, okay? So it's already gone nuclear. What were the winds that caused it? Let's find out.
This morning, no one thought this would be on the beach, but it has crossed over PCH, as we've seen already. David.
Yeah, and Colleen, the long-range spotting of this fire is all due to the wind. It's carrying any ember that's being put up and essentially moving it hundreds of thousands of feet, if not potentially about a mile or so out ahead of the fire, which is sparking additional fires and making it difficult to keep up with. Here's a look at the current observations. You can see that in the mountains right now, we're seeing gusts up to 62 miles an hour. Down by the beach, we're still seeing pretty good gusts, up to 40 to 45 miles an hour. And through parts of Pacific Palisades, we've got some gusts up into the 20 to 30 mile per hour range.
20 to 32 mile per hour range. And that's being generous because on the screen it says the gusts are 23 miles per hour. It's 23 miles per hour. That was the biggest gust they had, and it had reached the Pacific Ocean. So 23 miles an hour is all it took to push that fire all the way to the Pacific. Now, a part of the reason for that, the fuels were just so nasty, dude. The fuels are so receptive out there. They were so overdue to burn that every single ember that was launched aloft was like nothing but net. Every single ember was catching something on fire. You saw that earlier, those clips where it's like the wind was super calm when those cars were evacuating and yet the palm trees were on fire. I told you about those things. They're fire magnets. I want to continue on with this. Now, just really quickly, look at the variability of these reports. In Santa Monica Mountains, 62 miles an hour. In the Palisades, 23. It's almost 3 times higher the wind in the Santa Monica Mountains. But we will conflate these areas like, oh, that's right next to Topanga. It's Topanga, Malibu, and Pacific Palisades is right on the edge of Topanga and Malibu. So it's the same thing. It's not. There's so much variability here. So if you were watching this fire unfold from Santa Monica or Topanga Beach or from the Boney Mountain where this weather station is, you are miles and miles away. You are seeing really nasty winds, and then you are projecting that onto the fire environment when that's not the reality on the ground. Right here, they're saying 23 miles an hour.
Or down by the beach, we're still seeing pretty good gusts, up to 40 to 45 miles an hour. And through parts of Pacific Palisades, we've got some gusts up into the 20 to 30 mile per hour range.
Notice how he says it, some gusts. There's no hyperbole on it. No superlative whatsoever. It's just some gusts. Again, plenty for a fire, plenty for a bad fire, but not hurricane force. That's why you saw so many aircraft on that fire.
This is an hour-by-hour forecast here, and you can see that over the next couple of hours, we still have some pretty decent gusts in the 30 to 40 mile per hour range.
You see that? He just referred to 30 to 40 mile per hour gusts as decent, not hurricane force.
But suddenly, as we get closer and closer to midnight, it's that time frame we've been talking about, 10 p.m. to about 5 a.m., you'll see that the gust intensity suddenly cranks up. And we're potentially looking at gusts in the 40 to 50 mile per hour range, or even stronger. So not only are we concerned about the potential for embers being spread by this gusty wind, we're also now going to be concerned about trees potentially coming.
So now that's the kicker, right? So I'm not trying to pretend like this wasn't a wind-driven fire or that the winds made it super, super bad. I'm not saying that at all. But notice how, like, again, the winds did get worse throughout the day. So I'm showing all these clips from the daytime when you had some gusts, and they were moderate to significant. And he's saying, well, the real kick of the peak is 10 p.m., right? The winds did intensify throughout the night. But look at that, 44 miles per hour. And then it drops off, and then it goes down to the 20s, 32s, 29s. Now, again, having gusts like this, even if they were all just at 29 throughout the day, we saw that on this last graphic, the fire had reached the ocean on 23 mile per hour maximum gusts. So even if the entire day were this 2 a.m. minimum, that's still plenty to drive this fire and to see most of what we saw, okay? So I'm not pretending like the Palisades didn't burn down. I am not pretending that there weren't gnarly gusts in some areas of the fire environment. What I'm telling you is none of these gusts met the standard of hurricane force winds, and they were not enough to shut down aircraft. Aircraft were operating until nightfall, okay? Now, there is a lower threshold for winds when it's nighttime, okay? You have to be a little bit safer. So what they might feel comfortable flying in, they might feel fine flying in 36 to 40 mile per hour gusts during the day, but at night, you've got to be more careful. And so that can explain why maybe they don't have aircraft doing that stuff. So all that said, the whole reason why I'm trying to split this hair and die on this hill and, take all this criticism from people who are telling me, oh, bro, you weren't there. You don't know how bad the winds were. Like, dude, the numbers don't lie. But the whole reason why I'm trying to do this isn't to try to act as if there's like some other explanation for the fire. It was a wind-driven fire, right? We all, I'm not denying that. I'm trying to remind you guys that this could happen off of very precedented winds. You guys are all taking the wrong lesson from this. The whole point that I'm trying to make is that it does not require hurricane force winds, unprecedented weather events to get this kind of destruction. You just need a normal Santa Ana event. When your fuels are this overgrown and your community is this unprepared for wildfire, and I don't just mean the residents, I mean your bureaucracy. Your reservoirs aren't good to go. You're not pre-deploying strike teams. They're not clearing vegetation around the community. They're not doing controlled burns on Topanga State Park. All of that stuff. All it takes is 34 mile per hour gusts, totally precedented, a totally run-of-the-mill windstorm. That's all that it takes. Remember our homegirl from earlier?
65.
Wow. How long have you lived in the Palisades? And have
I grew up here, 1965.
Wow. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
1979, same fire. Yeah.
So this is a repeat of 1979.
Yep. I think that's the last time that it burned. Yep.
Erin, we thank you for talking to us, and we're wishing you all the best.
Thank you.
Please stay safe.
Thank you.
She wanted her to say that it was so unprecedented, and she just wouldn't because she's seen it before. And this is the reality. So, guys, all that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take away the excuse that corrupt bureaucrats and politicians use to get out of their responsibility for failing you. Do not indulge them. As the great Phil Cunningham says, 30 to 40 mile per hour winds is plenty strong to sustain an urban conflagration once one house ignites. And it is like dominoes falling. Once that first row of homes starts to go, that's it. That's all that it takes. All right, guys, that's all I got for you tonight. Thanks so much for joining me. Remember, the only way to prove that you're not AI is to do it live.